I try to got all the lights that I can get so you can see everything. Okay, we got this motor plate. It's together. Okay, the bolts are tight. Still got to put that one bolt in it, but everything's snugged up. I had to pick it up with the cherry picker. So, but I let it back down, and there's a gap. And that's common between those motor adapter plates. It's got a gap between that metal plate and the torque converter. You cannot tighten those up, it's going to pull the torque converter out of the seat. Make it leak, okay? Now, with that motor all the way down, I've got that fuel rail line in there, but let's be honest, that needs to come up. It's right against the diff. I know you're gonna have to get in there to where you can see, but it's sitting down right on the diff. So I gotta put something like a block between the jack, a block, and pick that motor up to where we at least got a half an inch to an inch, and then whatever that's going to take that back another half inch or an inch. So we're going to have to bend that up. That'll have to be bent up in order to get that fuel rail in and out. You know, it's just something that'll have to be done. Unless, you know, you could come over here, you had a custom-made fuel rail to where it just had two 90s coming out here, and, you know, right there's a spot to hook up to check your fuel pressure. I got to pull these off to clean them, but, you know, a guy probably could take and bend this some way. You know, you really need that bracket on there to, that bracket kind of goes down. I got to make sure I got that on there right. See here? That bracket goes over that, so it'll pull it in that way, but it's on the back side of the motor there for the stud. You really need to make sure that, you know, when you're eyeballing that stuff, to give yourself enough room. I put the fuel rail back on it because we got to know with the fuel lines how that's going to route. I'd rather just use factory stuff here, guys. You know, we can tap in on these lines here and run a line around the motor and whatever. You got to be careful because those little 2.2 Cavaliers, they got a fuel line that wraps around the front of the motor, and if they get hit, they catch on fire. I'll be honest with you. You know, right there where that's, you know, they get hit, buddy, and I just tell you, they start to burn. So I'm going to try to stick you in there. See right there where it's hitting? Now it's sitting right down on top of that fitting, and when I pulled that motor up on that side to get all the bolts tight without stress and stuff, it pulled right together. But they're sitting right on top of them fittings. Even with the manual rack, you still have those fittings. I don't know what it is. It's something. But we got to pick it up. We'll have to put us a block of wood between that front diff and the oil pan. You know, I don't know. I might have to make another spot to get another way to drain the oil, like the back of the pan, maybe. You know, I don't think it'll get all the oil out of the pan like that, where it's at. Blah, blah, blah. It needs to come up, and when it comes up, it's going to make those fuel lines get tighter and tighter. You know, I paid for this my own money, so I'm going to say what I need to say about it. You know, that plate, if you wanted a factory install without having to do a bunch of jazz like I'm doing, you know, you really need a thicker plate. I'm not talking down on those guys. I appreciate they even talked to me, okay? I appreciated everything. But in reality, you need to be, you know, with that block off plate and everything, you probably need to be like 3-4 inches thick on that plate in order to get it out far enough from the firewall to make this motor bolt up, like, without cutting it up and all that. You know. So whatever that would be, it's together though. It's completely together. It's on the dowel pins. It's snug all the way around. But now we need to get it to come up or whatever. I don't know if a guy could really put together like a motor kit that would be complete, to where you could bolt it up using factory mounts and a complete wiring harness and blah, blah, blah. There would be a lot. And then hook it up like factory to these and, you know, make lines that come across the top of the motor, or a different fuel rail to where you could just plug it up or whatever. You know, you just need to hook your fuel up right here. You just need to hook your fuel up right here. That's some kind of fuel pressure regulator. You know, a guy, if he had a custom made fuel rail to where he could just bolt it up, it came out on this side. You need to keep it away from the front of the motor, because if they take a hit, You know, hopefully not, but if they take a hit and those fuel lines come around the front of the motor like them little Cavaliers, they catch on fire. You know, it'll poke a hole in that line or break the line or smash it off there, and it'll just pump out fuel till you turn the key off. Sometimes you can't. You know what I'm saying? Right here's the fuel lines coming up. Right here. And you got that one and you got the other one. So, right there it is. It's a return line. So, you know, you can straighten that stuff up a bit and get it bent just beautifully or whatever, but you know, it's pretty much kind of custom. But, and the motor, if you look at the motor, it's like that. It needs to come over this way some. So you need to pick it up and pull it over. You need to get your center line on it and kind of whatever. If the transmission, you get your tape line in there, get the transmission center, and then wherever that motor's bolting up at, that's just the way it's going to be. You know, the motor might look a little crooked in there, but as long as that bell housing's solid centered, we're good. And we'll just call it good. Process elimination. We'll get it jacked up and we'll take a tape measure and just check from both sides of the center of the transmission, you know, 1/8 inch within an 1/8 inch, and side to side, and then, you know, wherever that's at, we'll start making these motor mounts once we get it up and away from everything. Now, like I say, we'll probably have to take that motor back out once ever we get everything fitted with motor mounts and all that. We'll weld the motor mounts out solid, weld the firewall up solid. You know, I'm going to be solid. You know, if it takes a hit, you know, I want it to be as good as it can be. Those fuel lines are kind of tight on the back. You know, we're going to use factory stuff. That way, if we need to replace it or whatever, we can use factory stuff. You just find something at a junkyard or order it online. So, let's keep plugging. Right there, we still got probably 2 inches on the bell housing. We'll see what it looks like whenever, and I'm saying 2 inches, that's the gap between the top of the bell housing and the floorboard. Once we get it up and whatever. I think once we get it up, you're not going to have room to tighten them bolts up. But that heater box, if I'm not mistaken, it sits right on top of that transmission hump. Or pretty close to it. Time you add your lines. See those heater ducts right there coming in? I don't know if you can see it. The black pieces in there. There you go. That black ductwork. You know, you can tell that heater box is right against the floorboard. So, I probably got lights in your eyes and everything else, but that's kind of what we're thinking. But, I mean, I can bend that up some more, but it ain't got much room. You're going to get into that spot for the windshield wipers, and we don't want to do that. So.